Welcome to This Explainer. Let's jump right in. If the lab industry had to crown one single buzzword for this decade, digitalization would win by a landslide. Literally everyone is talking about it. But I'm going to kick things off today with a pretty bold claim. Despite all the hype, all the endless industry catchphrases, and the millions of dollars being thrown around, true lab digitalization in 2026 is actually mostly an illusion. Today, we're diving deep into a detailed summary and analysis of the brand new State of Lab Digitalization Report by LIMS. We're going to pull back the curtain and look at what is really happening behind the closed doors of 110 quality assurance and quality control labs.
Your lab is probably not digital. Man, that is a tough pill to swallow, right? If you're running a QA or QC lab right now, you might be thinking, hold on a second, we just bought a massive new software system. And honestly, that right there is the central mystery of our analysis today. We need to figure out why so many well-funded, highly advanced scientific facilities are essentially still stuck in the past. What does being digital actually mean in 2026? And why are so few labs pulling it off?
Let's start our investigation with this massive number, 95%. When the researchers at LIMS surveyed these 110 QA and QC labs across the food and beverage, chemical, pharmaceutical, and environmental sectors, an overwhelming 95% proudly stated they use digital tools. If you only looked at that one metric, you'd think, well, the race to digitalization is already won. Everyone's got a LIMS, some instrument software, or maybe an electronic lab notebook in the mix. On paper, it sounds completely digital. But this is exactly where the paradox begins, and things get really fascinating. Because when LIMS dug just a little bit deeper and asked those exact same labs to honestly assess where they currently stand, the numbers dropped off a cliff. Only 1 in 5, that's just 20%, actually put themselves in the fully digital camp. That means their instruments and software are completely connected, and data flows continuously without a human needing to manually push it along. The other 80%? They landed somewhere in the messy, frustrating middle. So the big question is, how on earth can 95% of labs have digital tools, but only 20% actually feel fully digital? What is the glitch in the matrix here?
Well, this illustrates the core problem brilliantly. The lab industry has been measuring the wrong thing for years. On one side, we have having tools, buying software, installing an electronic notebook, basically just checking a box on an IT form. On the flip side, we have connected systems, where your instruments and your software are actually talking to each other seamlessly. The industry made a critical mistake when they let the question, do you have lab software, become a stand-in for, are you digital? Because as the LIMS report clearly shows, those are two totally different realities.
Owning cutting-edge software is really just step one. True digitalization means your data can move autonomously through your systems. If a highly trained scientist still has to grab a printout from a machine, walk across the room, and manually type those results into a database, you aren't digital. You're just using really expensive digital typewriters. Software is just a tool. The connection between those tools is the actual digital transformation.
And it is incredibly rare to see that true connection actually realized. According to the 1LIMS research, only 1 in 10 labs in their survey have their instruments and software fully connected. Just 10%. I mean, think about the reality of a typical analytical lab for a second. You might be running a titrator from one manufacturer, a mass spectrometer from a second company, and a precision balance from a third. Getting the analytical results from all those devices into one centralized, automated place, for 90% of labs, it's just not happening automatically.
So, if these highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar analytical machines aren't talking to each other automatically, what is keeping the modern lab from completely falling apart? Brace yourselves because the answer is almost comical. It's Excel. Microsoft Excel is the secret lab glue holding this incredibly advanced, highly regulated industry together. It is literally the duct tape of the scientific world. Which leads us to a super suspenseful question. Where does all this data actually go? If a state-of-the-art mass spectrometer finishes a highly complex, critical sample analysis and has absolutely no automated way to send that data to the main system, what happens to it? It doesn't just vanish into thin air. A human has to manually step in to capture that value. And here is the big reveal to our mystery. 54%. More than half of all the QA and QC labs surveyed by LIMS still rely heavily on Excel for their day-to-day work. When results come off an isolated instrument that isn't connected to anything, they get dumped directly into a spreadsheet first. That massive digital gap between sophisticated analytical devices and the central lab database, it's being bridged every single day by manual Excel spreadsheets. But wait, it gets even more surprising. Let's just look at the breakdown of analytical labs that have already invested the time and money into a dedicated LIMS. Even among these supposedly upgraded facilities, 1 in 3 are still opening Excel every single day. And incredibly, 1 in 5 are still crunching their numbers entirely by hand. They bought the ultimate digital tool, but they never built the integrations to let the data flow. Okay, so we've secured the crime scene. We know what the problem is. Now let's move into the investigation phase of our explainer. If lab managers know this manual entry is inefficient, and they know using Excel as a permanent database isn't a viable long-term solution, then what are the true digital roadblocks stopping them from fixing it? Why aren't more labs further along on their journey in 2026?
Get ready for a huge plot twist in the 1LMS research. Whenever you ask why a company hasn't updated its tech, the assumed answer is always money, right? We just don't have the budget. But let's look closer at the data. When asked what is preventing further automation, budget was cited by only 7% of respondents. It came in dead last. The real villains holding lab automation back are much more structural and, honestly, way more human.
The actual hurdles are regulatory constraints, staff resistance, and the extreme difficulty of connecting different systems. These are essentially people and process problems. Regulatory pressure makes it incredibly hard to justify and validate every single change. You've also got highly trained staff who have worked the exact same way for years, and it takes serious convincing to change their habits. Simply getting finance to approve a budget doesn't magically dissolve human resistance, nor does it magically write the integration code for your instruments.
It can feel totally overwhelming when you're looking from the inside out. But luckily, 1LIMS stresses that getting your data to actually flow between systems is an absolutely solvable problem. The truth is, most analytical labs have way more in common than they think. So what's the path forward? How do lab managers actually start resolving these human and structural bottlenecks to achieve real digitalization?
The report offers some clear, actionable advice straight from the experts. Step 1. Identify the bottlenecks. Don't try to boil the ocean or change everything all at once. Pinpoint exactly what specific issue is holding your lab back right now. Step 2. Run a pilot project. If your biggest hurdle is staff resistance, don't force a massive lab-wide software rollout. Instead, start a small pilot program exclusively with the team members who actually want it to work. Build momentum and prove the value through their success first.
Which brings us to our final, provocative question for you to chew on today. What is still slowing your lab down today? Is it really a lack of technology, or is it about the people, the processes, and the lack of true integration? To find out what comes next, you need to read the full State of Lab Digitalization Report 2026. Head over to 1lims.com, download it, and discover what the experts predict for the next 12 months, including the highly anticipated, yet often totally misunderstood, role of AI in the lab. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope it brought you some clarity, and we'll see you next time.